Is anime getting banned? The answer, obviously, no. Still, people have been freaking out about a new law that could affect anime, manga, games, everything. I saw some people debunk it,
virtually indistinguishable,
but it didn't add up because their debunking felt wrong. I'm either right or I'm gonna sound like one of those fake fact checkers, but still, I wanted to figure out why this bill was even added. So I started reading a bunch of laws and court cases and honestly came out surprised. People have actually been thrown in jail. So I had to look up what rights we really have. And this is America, right? Of course we have them. But turns out there's a million ways to strip them as well. So this video is going to end up long and probably too offensive for some of you. So TLDR, Texas 43.23 plus 43.235 equals US 1466A. You can figure that out, or someone in the comments, or yeah, I don't know, I might not get any comments. Speaking of comments, please comment, like, etc., because looking at my upload schedule, I clearly need as much positive reinforcement as I can get. Seriously. So first off, the most important thing, you will never get arrested for anime, manga, fictional, whatever, for CP, CSAM, CSAM, whatever they want to call it. Could be the most lewd, degenerate thing ever, and you would still be fine. US Section 2256, which was created in 1978, states that it needs to be indistinguishable from an actual minor, aka like a real human being. So this indistinguishable part is like very important. It comes up a lot in US law, and it's also used in Texas, which in part with the SB 20 bill that everyone's freaking out about. Some people started trying to debunk the scenario, rightfully so, but in an effort, they downplayed certain aspects, such as they used the indistinguishable part. For example, Rev says that this wouldn't apply to anime because of that indistinguishable part, because obviously you can tell fiction versus reality. It's very distinguishable. But if you look closer, the indistinguishable part is not a requirement. It's like an addition. It's like a bonus, like a multiplier. It elevates the offense to a second-degree felony. Now, more on that later when I actually go through the bill. What you do need to understand is that, yes, they could theoretically prosecute you for drawings, fiction, writing, whatever. The law is very overbroad and vague. And maybe for a good reason. You see, Texas already has laws against AI and CP, but maybe if I were to give the benefit of the doubt to these Texas lawmakers and assume they are intelligent, maybe they had some type of thought processes. Maybe they thought that, okay, well, these generations, they were sourced from this training data, and maybe this training data had some illegal content in it. So, if you're scrolling through Twitter, sometimes you'll see fan art and whatnot, and it'll say like AI plus GC or something like that. It's kind of common in like Japanese art and whatnot, and basically it means like maybe like 80% of it is generated, and then 20% they edited it after in like Photoshop or whatever, Clip Studio. But how do you know? Maybe it's 70%, maybe it's 60%. And then of that percent, how do you know what percent of that maybe has some type of illegal material in its training data? Like, you're not going to know. So if the Texas boomers had any semblance of a thought process, they might be thinking this on purpose to cover all their tracks. But I highly doubt the, intelligence of a average boomer goes that far. Something to think about, because in the future, honestly, right now, because like you might be watching this on like some iPhone or TV or computer, and the components might be assembled in China or some inhumane factory, and then maybe the materials that were mined in some African country where some underage child was getting whipped. Like who knows? Like, how many degrees of separation from something illegal could you potentially stop caring? Like, and you wouldn't even be able to know. Like, it already happens today. There's still a good reason they had to write this bill. Now, good might be subjective, but there is a reason, and it makes a little more sense once you see what Texas had before this bill and then after this bill, in addition with what the United States had with their federal law. I'm going to go over some cases, legal precedent, that actually protect your rights, but at the same time, there's going to be a lot of workarounds that, make things a little gray area. So the first one was Ashcroft versus Free Speech Coalition in 2002. This protects freedom of speech as long as it's not CP. And we already stated earlier that anything like anime, whatever fiction, is not CP. You could watch 1,000 episodes of magical girl lollies getting tortured by Utena, whatever her last name is, Hiragi. It's Hiragi, isn't it? But there's exceptions. You have to see this wording, non-obscene. Then there's the Protect Act. which is supposed to protect children, but as part of the section 1466A, it says that it does not need to be indistinguishable. It doesn't need to be an actual, like, it doesn't need to be a human being. It could just be a drawing. Now, there's parts to this where it needs to be obscene. There's also parts to it where it doesn't need to be obscene. It's very vague, and one court ruled it unconstitutional, but it doesn't matter because the person still got thrown in jail for 6 months. More on that later. You're probably wondering, obscene, not obscene, it doesn't really matter. You know, you could be at your own house, your own private place, and you could be playing some visual novel, which, by the way, like, I'm saying all this stuff, but low-key I'm a casual. Like, I haven't even played Saya no Uta, and apparently that's really short, so yeah. But I don't need to tell you. I don't need to be like, oh, well, this could potentially affect Dragon Ball. Yeah, you know that. You're not an idiot. Like, if you're watching this, you're probably not an idiot. Look, I just watched Ryokubu. What the frick is this? Some alliteration right here. And I just watched Tenchi no 3P back to back. Well, I'm still watching that. Let me say, we must defend the basketball lollies. Fortunately, in the United States, your privacy is protected, such as established by this U.S. Supreme Court case, Stanley v. Georgia, 1969, protects your private possession, even of obscene things. Notice the possess part. That's very important because over time, it seems like your rights kind of get dwindled down after more stuff gets added. So 4 years after that, there was another case, United States versus 12 200 feet reels of basically someone tried to import some obscene films and it got seized. And the government basically said, oh, well, you can possess it, but you can't import it. You know, there's a big difference. Importing is different from possessing it. Yeah. So later on, there was another case, Extreme Associates. This was a case that lasted from 2005 to 2009, where it was a extreme fetish adult films. Except this company, it was a company this time. They were the distributor. And they said that, well, you're not just possessing it, you're distributing it. So even though in 1969 it was established by the U.S. Supreme Court that private possession of even obscene things is protected under the First Amendment, it doesn't say anything about buying it, sending it, receiving it, etc. They're basically pulling a, well, actually. Now, about the obscenity part, it was never actually legally determined in court whether these adult films were obscene or not, because there's something called the Miller test that legally defines it, and this needs to be tested in court. But instead, they settled on a 1-year sentence for a plea deal. But the next case, we're going to see them actually run through the Miller test. So we're actually going to see how they determine if it's obscene. Now, fast forward to 2008, and we have some cases where people are actually thrown into jail for fictional drawings. U.S. vs. Whorley. Now, this guy is indefensible. He's definitely on some type of list, if you know what I mean. But in regards to the drawings, he used a public library to download something from his email, and then he printed those pictures with the public printer in the library. Now, that alone, honestly, that should be illegal. I'm pretty sure that is illegal. That should be what the obscenity is. But obscenity is something else. Now, as we stated before, your rights only cover possession. The way they got him was basically through the internet. I'll explain. So there's this thing called Title 18 U.S. Code Section 1462. And the history of this law basically goes back to 1873, which was the Comstock Act. So this guy, Anthony Comstock, he's described as a anti-vice activist, at least by Wikipedia. So he was against things that could convey obscene crime or abortion, like, you know, stuff like that. He's basically the epitome of what you would imagine like a very super moral, religious, right-wing person. As technology evolved, these laws changed to apply to the entire internet, which means they had a case to prosecute him for. To determine if the material is obscene, the government uses the Miller test, which is the legal definition. So there's 3 parts to it. Number 1, whether the average person applying contemporary community standards would find that the work taken as a whole appeals to the prurient interest, which basically means does it fire your neurons, let's just say. So the second part, whether the work depicts or describes in a patently offensive way conduct or excretory functions specifically defined by applicable state law. The third part, whether the work taken as a whole lacks serious literary, artistic, political, or scientific value. Now, the first two parts, let's just be real, he's probably not passing. Now, the third part, you can kind of argue this. Whether the work taken as a whole lacks seriously literary... Yeah, but here's the thing. You don't determine that. The jury determines that. How it works is in America, I think once you're like 18 or something, they ask you to do jury duty. So this is just random people. I'm sure a lot of you have been called for jury duty and can probably explain better than me how it works, because I'm not going to lie. I had an exemption when I got called one time, and I never got called after that. But pretty much they pick random people, and you go to the court and you answer questions, and they determine who's guilty or not based on that. Now, let's just say, for example, you had Dragon Ball, the OG one. So Goku's a little kid. He got his little tail and his little Ochinshin sticking out. And they could be like, oh, that's bestiality with a minor or something. Any big shonen, you got Bleach with that Yoruichi panel, the famous one. You know which one I'm talking about. And then you got... it doesn't really have to even be like a lolly, or I don't know how old Yoruichi is, but let's say My Dress Up Darling Marin, she does the Shizuku cosplay in this one episode, and you got that one frame where she's really sweaty and it's really jiggly, and they could be like, oh, that's excretory functions, So then you'd go to the third part of the Miller test and be like, well, it's actually like a literary work, it's got writing, it's got directing, it's got sound, it's got voice acting, it's a visual masterpiece by Cloverworks Studio. But you know what they'd say? They're like, I ain't reading all that. Literally, it could happen, because it did happen. So going back to the case, it says, Whorley asked the district court to emphasize, with respect to the third part of the Miller test, that, quote, as a whole meant the entire work, book, movie, magazine, or story from which the matter in question is derived. Taking a single picture or group of pictures from a body of work does not constitute the whole of the work, just as a single passage from a book or a story does not constitute the whole book or story. The district court rejected Whorley's suggestion because the jury could use its, quote, own common sense and logic in determining what the word as a whole means. They don't care what as a whole means. They're just going to Google modern Kitagawa age, and it's going to be the first AI result on Google, and then they're going to be like, yep, I see it as a whole, right in front of me. I see these offensive, voluptuous meat bags with this suspicious liquids in between them, very clearly obscene and must be banned. My Dress Up Darling, more like My Diddy Darling. This is some Diddy-eye anime, bro. We gotta shut down this. So you can see how relying on random people for a jury is going to cause the Miller test to be very subjective. Now, the next case is probably the most worrying, because this guy was 100% clean. He was like a model citizen or whatever. So this happened in 2008 as well, U.S. versus Handley. He was charged for his manga from Japan, specifically under the Protect Act, the section 1466A part, which I've basically memorized by now. Since he imported the manga, remember, the law only protects you if you possess it. If you import it or receive it or whatever, there's nothing protecting your privacy or First Amendment there. And because this is a fictional character, 1466A of the Protect Act also applies. I saw a lot of people say, oh, the Protect Act is unconstitutional, but I think they're getting it a bit wrong. So I'm going to do a quick breakdown of this U.S. code right here. So there's a subsection A and a subsection B lowercase. These are the two main parts. They look really similar, but the A is basically about producing, distributing, etc. B is basically about possessing. And then of these subsections, there's a number 1 and a number 2 subsection. And then of those subsections, there's a capital A and a capital B subsection. The subsections with number 2 have the terminology appears to be, which is very vague and basically allows you to skip the Miller test. The subsections with the number 1 literally say is obscene. So the ones that say is obscene, you need to pass the Miller test. Now, for this case specifically in Iowa, the district court, Judge Gritzner, struck down those sections because he said they were unconstitutionally overbroad because they did not require the Miller test. The term appears to be is just too vague, and the law just went too far. But the other sections stayed, which means you still got to prove your obscenity via the jury in the Miller test. They never actually determined whether the material was obscene or not because his lawyer told him to take a plea deal. Basically, he got 6 months of prison versus a potential 15 years and $250,000 fine. And he also didn't get put on any offender registries or anything like that, which I don't know why he would have been, but apparently he could have been. But he didn't. He just had to serve 6 months in prison and, get his life ruined. And it's that easy. Basically, the attorney thought he was going to lose. So this is what they said. So Chris had the following difficult options. He could defend the images which, when projected on a 8 by 8 feet screen on a courtroom wall, an Iowa jury certainly, and any jury probably would have, likely agreed they do not want in their community. And if you think that, oh, it's just a bunch of rednecks in Iowa or whatever, no. Look, he even says that it appears widely supported, even by many otherwise apparently liberal bloggers. Guys, this was in 2008. We're now in 2025, and instead of the liberal bloggers, we have straight up leftists on anime Twitter. Not just regular people, literally people that watch anime with all these like pronouns in their bio and stuff. They'll be like, that is actually a minor. Like, these people, they'll be like, fiction affects reality and blah blah blah. Like, we literally have these people with like their watermelon emojis and their like rainbow flag. Like, no offense to these people, but you know who I'm talking about. Actually, yes, offense to those people. If you're not offended, then good. If you're offended, then too bad. So you got the pronouns and bio people, and another thing now we have is the media tab people. The media tab people are just very media illiterate. In fact, they're just illiterate in general. You can't really communicate with these people properly because the conversation usually involves they can't really formulate individual thought. Instead, relying on their media tab, which is filled with battle shonen like Dragon Ball Z with Goku and Gogeta, One Piece, etc., I Show Speed, and LeBron James. Realistically, the jury is going to be filled with a bunch of boomers who just want to get back to work or go home after a long day of wage slaving. And in the off chance you somehow get the draw of luck and have a room of anime fans, well, you are still 100% cooked. Because most of the anime fans these days are the newer ones, the younger ones, which were part of the two groups I described earlier. Can't even debate me on this. This is a large part of the anime quote-unquote fandom. Like, you get a better defense with the lolly Hitler profile pictures. Those two groups, they're not defending each other either. You know what I mean? Like, let's say you have another group, like a more media literate one, and they got the Shoujo Tsubaki, also known as Midori, and the media tab people, they might look it up on their phone and be like, hey yo, this that banned anime, bro, this banned media shit, I gotta get out of here, I'm trying to go back to work, bro. Oh wait, I don't got a job. And they could bring out One Piece, and there's like this 12-year-old called Bonnie, and then someone in the audience is gonna be like, oh my god, that is an actual minor, like, this is negative portrayal in media, it's gonna perpetrate through society, and like, we can't have these harmful representations normalizing this. Yeah, you are literally screwed. One Piece fan will be like, oh, but it's a whole story, there's like 1,000 chapters, you gotta read this thing. And then the other guy in the audience will, I ain't reading all that. And then like, it'll be like, oh, but there's like the Dressrosa arc and like the by the way, I don't watch One Piece or read One Piece. And then he'll be like, but the impact frames and the aura and the Luffy, he's my goat Luffy, how could you do this to my goat? And then like, the boomer in the audience, like the boomer, like, goat, like the bestiality. Okay, yeah, you are 100% cooked. As you can see, it's very easy to get prosecuted for obscenity if it gets to that point. I'm not saying it's easy. Like, I'm pretty sure 99.999% chance this never happens, even to the lewdest things. But when it does happen, you are basically screwed if it gets to this point. Because, like, just think about it. It's not a national standard. It depends on where you are. So, like, let's say you're in a very conservative area and, like, you're watching JoJo's and you're thinking you're safe, right? But they pull up the panel with, like, the Abdul and the grandpa JoJo, I forgot his name. And maybe this is a very conservative district and they see, like, a black man and a white man doing this in public. Oh, yeah, you are screwed. All the stuff I talked about up to now already exists. Now we're going to talk about Texas and what they already have and why they're probably adding in the new one. So Texas has this chapter 43.21, which defines obscenity, which is literally the same stuff we mentioned earlier with the Miller test and, those 3 things you got to pass. But there's a little special stuff that Texas has. It seems like there's a thing about, let's just call them devices. If you're just listening to this, I'm going to put it on the screen so you can look at it, which device I'm talking about. But in their offense for obscenity, which is 43.23, this is the chapter that the new offense is going to get added to. So this is 43.23. They're going to add 43.235, the one right after this. So this is the one right before it. So you got to understand this. Now, what I found out was nothing in this section actually says the word possession. Like, or receipt or acquisition or something like that, which, as we saw earlier, these could be very important legal terms. So they actually can't prosecute you. I'm led to believe that this section is mostly about distribution/promotion based on the other stuff they say. For example, they do have something about possession, but it means you have to have 6 or more of those devices that I was talking about earlier, where if you have 6 or more of them, they assume you're going to be distributing or promoting them. So this whole section basically focuses on distribution/promotion. Now I want to talk about this section H here, subsection H. A lot of people got this part wrong, because if you see, it says something about, it needs to be a child, indistinguishable, virtually indistinguishable, identifiable child, like, etc. And they're like, oh yeah, anime is not that, so it doesn't qualify. It's not a requirement. But that's not what it says. It's not a requirement for, like, it doesn't need to be an actual child. It could be anything. Anything could be obscene. If you read it from the beginning, it says that the punishment for an offense under subsection A or C is increased. So there's already a punishment, and it gets increased to the 2nd-degree felony if it's an actual human child. It makes sense when you look back at the beginning. So for obscenity, the punishments would either be a state jail felony, which is 1 less than a 3rd-degree felony in Texas, where, by the way, 3, 2, 1, 1 is the highest. And then the other one would be a Class A misdemeanor. So the section that with the child and whatnot, it's actually in addition to that. And you might think, because I thought this too, why would they even have real human children in here? Because they already have a section specifically for CP. Why would they just put it there where it's clearly illegal? Well, I don't know. I'm not a lawyer, but I hypothesize that obscenity is vague enough that it could cover things like, feet pics or whatever lewd pictures that people have come up with. So then we come to the new proposal, which would add this 43.235. This is right after the 0.23. Now we're at 0.235. This is a new offense that basically gets around everything from the previous one. So the previous one had 0.23, this section. It didn't say anything about possession. This new offense explicitly says the word possession. And it also says, regardless of whether the depiction is an actual child, a cartoon or animation, or an image creating using AI or other computer software. So now if you combine both the previous section I talked about, 43.23, with the new proposal on 43.235, you actually get something that looks very similar to the federal code 1466A, which was the thing that was added under the Protect Act. It looks very similar. What I mean by that is, so the new proposal specifically mentions possession. The previous section in Texas didn't say anything. It only said distribution or promotion. And then the new section that they added, or that they might add, they probably will add, also says it doesn't need to be an identifiable child. It specifically says, what does it say? Give me a frick. I have like 1,000 tabs open. It specifically says that it does not need to be a child, an actual child, cartoon, animation, image created using an AI application or other computer software. Then you go back to the federal law, 1466A, aka the part that was added by the Protect Act, and there's a definition under here, F1. The term visual depiction includes undeveloped film, videotape, data stored on a computer. Basically, they have everything listed there. I mean, they don't explicitly say AI, but they say stuff like computer-generated image. Basically, everything could be there. And now Texas has added theirs, which explicitly says artificial intelligence, but it also says, animations and whatnot. But basically, they're the same now. Now, why would Texas even attempt to add this if they already have the federal one from the United States? Well, I would assume that it's just easier to throw someone in a state jail than a federal prison. You know what I mean? Like federal jail, to arrest someone, you might need the FBI or whatever. Like, it's going to be complicated. With a state one, they just get the cops and, you're going to jail the next day. Okay, not really, but you get my point. Like, it's going to take less time and less money. It's easier to prosecute someone in the state than in federal, which is exactly the type of messaging that they had. Like, if you read the messaging from the guy who wrote this bill, he was saying like, oh, we really got to protect the children. Like, he was making it sound really urgent. So I guess this does the job. The only major difference I could see between the state Texas law and the federal US law is that, so I like to think in edge cases, right? So the worst possible case, if you get thrown into prison somehow, would be 2 years max in Texas prison, versus in federal, you would get minimum 5 years up to 20. So in the absolute worst case, if you were in Texas and you went to state prison, it would actually be less severe. Like, honestly, anytime they say protect the children, it's probably going to have some big caveats. So, for example, like with Apple, I know with iCloud, they were trying to have some software that just keeps scanning your iCloud, and people were saying that was an invasion of privacy. Then for Android, for Google, there was literally like some app that they pre-installed on your phone, like automatically. Like, I think this was like a month or two ago, and it was just going to scan all your pictures. Even if you don't care about your rights or whatever, it's still going to drain your battery life. So, yeah. By the way, I learned this from my Twitter mutuals. So basically, the new Texas stuff doesn't change much except where you get thrown in prison, whether it's Texas or federal prison. That's also kind of the reason why I feel like these laws shouldn't exist. Okay, maybe not just straight up elimination, but they need to be relooked heavily. The slippery slope is real. So apparently Australia was trying to ban Eromanga Sensei, which I've watched, so I'm screwed. And then apparently Russia has already banned Ilya, which apparently there's a new movie coming out, and I'm definitely watching that, so I'm double screwed. And countries like China have banned Attack on Titan, so yeah, it's over for me. Like, it's just straight up game over. Of course, there's VPNs, but you get my point. Like, back in the day, it probably made more sense because the communities were more local and everything, and no internet, and now the world's all interconnected, and not just that, we're getting products from Japan and overseas, and before, there was like, just maybe you could send packages, so import and export laws, and now there's the internet, so you can download stuff and emails, and now you got streaming and all sorts of stuff. And as more technology comes out, like with AI, I feel like there's like a split. And the split happens with the people and the government. The people, they either become stupid or smarter. Like the dumb ones get one shot by TikTok. Like they'll just be scrolling at those those videos with the Minecraft gameplay, or the Subway Surfers gameplay and the Family Guy clips, or you maybe have some super genius kid that's like learning some new stuff on TikTok. Who knows? But and then it also starts with, it mostly starts with the parenting, but the technology enables like the, I guess, bad parenting, I guess. And then there's also a split with the government, right, where like the government either becomes more restrictive because, realistically speaking, they can't control everything. Every time there's a new technology or something, they cannot control it. The only way they can control it is by like over controlling, like overreaching. They can't really they can't just filter out what they want. Like you can't just get like the AI stuff. You got to get like everything. It's just impossible because in the future you're not going to be able to tell what's AI, right? It's going to be on your phone. There's no company for them to like cancel. There's no company for them to sue. It's literally, your phone is going to be powerful enough for you to run like a ChatGPT level model on it. And there's nothing they can do. It could be open source too. Like every new technology is an opportunity for the government to remove your rights further, or, add more surveillance and whatnot. Because just think about it. Like something like 3D printers, right? You can print anything you want. Now, what's one thing the government probably doesn't want you printing? Well, there's a thing called ghost guns, right? Now, one day these 3D printers are going to get so good, which they're pretty much at that point already. And obviously the blueprints for these things should be available online, right? Because like that's free speech, right? You should be able to talk and send things. They're either going to restrict the free speech or restrict your privacy and add surveillance, like maybe install some type of software on your printer or some type of chip that's going to, you know what I'm saying? Like it's basically how it's going to work. And then think about or they could just get rid of the Second Amendment, that might be just easier. And this isn't like a right wing or left wing type position. I'm just being real about it. Like this is just realistically, like for example, you might have like your trans friends printing out some type of crack house hormones in the future. And I say print because they'll just buy like ink. They'll just buy various chemical compounds or whatever. And then the recipe, that's free speech, right? It's all online. You just click the play button and it'll just start printing. And, people will also do recreational drugs. Many of them will probably be illegal. People will also have medications, which might not be legal in the states. It's just there's no way they can control this all. So they have to over control stuff. And the only way this stuff is gonna work. The only way it's gonna work really is you either have like a high trust society where you just trust people are gonna do the right thing, or the government kind of just has to control more. It's basically, there's only two ways basically. So in conclusion, the last time for real now, because I think I said that earlier. In conclusion, I don't know if we should get rid of obscenity laws, but they definitely need to be looked heavily again, especially considering with AI and stuff. I don't know how fast the government is going to prioritize obscenity. I mean, in Texas they have, but if we ever want to get them to relook at this stuff, well, I found this list of criticisms that was pretty interesting. For example, look at this one. Obscenity law can be used to target specific groups. You don't want to target specific groups, right? For example, in the 1930s, 90% of those targeted with obscenity were, and if you can start that narrative going that, historically they were disproportionately used to target, and they were anti, they might start moving a lot faster after that. Just a hunch.